Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome, dear brothers and sisters around the world. This is your host, Omar Khalid, in a new program. This new program, before I say the title of it, I would like to say 2 points. There are people who attack Islam, who are doubtful, and maybe some of them, they want to know about Islam. On the other side, also, we have Muslims, they want to strengthen their religion. They want to know more about Islam. So that's why we picked this important topic of this program, the signs of prophethood. We know that it is actually an old science within the scholarship of Muslims from hundreds of years. Some of the scholars have written a lot of books concerning this. So the signs of prophethood, like what? Like the miracles of the prophet, like the top miracle, the Quran, like the character of the prophet before being a prophet and afterwards. We are going to cover all of these topics and more. And we want by this to make us as Muslims proud to be Muslims and how to talk with others also and give them da'wah. So with these goals, we're going to talk about different topics, and we're going to start with one of the most essential things as signs of the prophethood, which is that Islam is not a new message. Some people, they use this as a misconception about Islam, but at the same time, actually it's a strong point to support that Islam is from God. But before going to the details, I would like to welcome Sheikh Ibrahim Zidan to this program. I'm very happy to meet you again, Sheikh Ibrahim, and very pleased.
Jazakumullah khair, it's my pleasure.
Actually, this program, we're going to talk about so many points, and I picked this topic to start with because so many people, they use this as a sign for prophethood, and at the same time, some people, they attack and say, well, this is not something unique, this is not something new. So, well, why should I change from Christianity, let's say, to Islam? Or why should I leave Judaism to Islam? And if the person is not a Muslim, or a Christian or a Jew, maybe an atheist, he says, well, these are just one religion in one basket. They're just repeating the same message. So that means it's not true. So how can we answer this after laying the foundation of that? Is it really very important sign of prophethood to see this is one message and Islam is a completion of all the messages?
Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa Rasulullah. The subject of Islam is the same message as all the messages before from the time of Adam alayhi salam. This is a necessity basically, this is a must. Because the truth cannot be one and the opposite of it. And the consistency of the message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the human beings, this is what it's supposed to be. Otherwise contradiction is the first step of all kinds of corruption. And this is one aspect that is very important for people to understand and for us as human beings, that since the Lord of the Alameen is one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator of all things, and since He's the most wise, He created us for a reason, and the reason is well known, and that is to worship Him alone. How to worship Him and what this message, who is the one that's going to convey that message to us? Prophethood is a necessity. It's something that humanity are in need of it more than they need food and drink. So the fact that there are messengers of Allah is as necessity as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of the heavens and the earth. So these messengers, the one that sent them is only one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the message cannot be more than just one consistent message, and that is worship the one in the heavens, worship Him alone, do not associate partners with Him. So this is what it means that the message is the same. But when it comes to the shara'a, the legislations, halal and haram, this can change from one messenger to the other, which is understandable for the messengers being sent to a specific tribe, specific times, and then the final messenger of Allah, Muhammad to all mankind. But also the basics of the message has been corrupted by the people. A messenger is being sent, calling people to the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in worship. And then this messenger dies and people would start to corrupt the message. And they would associate partners with Allah. And then another message need to be sent. And that's why when the Prophet ﷺ was sent, if people honestly, truthfully look at the face of earth at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and this is mentioned in the hadith in Sahih Muslim that Inna Allah nadhara ila ahli al-ard. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala looked at the people on the earth. فَمَقَتَهُمْ عَرَبَهُمْ وَعَجَمَهُمْ إِلَّا بَقَيْ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْكِتَابِ. He hated all of them except few of the people of the book. Why? Because the earth was full of associating partners with Allah. Even the followers of Judaism, Christianity, it's supposed to be one thing, but they differed among themselves. Many of the truth has been concealed, associating partners with Allah. The religion of Isa alayhi salam has been totally disturbed except very few things, and very few people were upon the Tawheed. So humanity were in need of a final messenger, which is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and for the message to be preserved this time till the day of judgment. So the subject of the core of the message has been disturbed, and that's why people need to go back to the truth that was present in all of the messengers of Allah by the messengership of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then the new ways and laws and so on that would stays with the humanity till the day of judgment.
SubhanAllah. And does that mean, Shaykh Ibrahim, that's why in the Quran, تعالوا إلى كلمة سواء, like this is like the word from the Prophet to the Christians and the Jews, let's come and unite on just one word, to believe in one statement, and which is the truth. And like we are not telling them that you are going to be like away from the truth. This is actually the truth which you deviated from. So we're not coming with a new message. But the point is that they were afraid, and they said like no. And actually there was a story about this, I think, Shaykh Ibrahim, that they wanted to like pray to Allah or something like this, who is the right and who is the wrong, and the one who is like on the wrong side of the truth would be punished or cursed by Allah.
Right.
And the others will be like blessed.
No. This happened at the time of the Prophet ﷺ by the delegation of Najran, and they were Christians, and Christians, scholars in Christianity and priests and so on, and they came to the Prophet ﷺ, and they debated with the Prophet ﷺ. That's why the beginning of Surah Al Imran, and this is an important part for Muslims to read and to reflect upon, the first 80 or 80 something verses in Al Imran in the beginning, the third surah in the Quran, in the order of the surahs today, it's all about this subject. And with clear evidences and proofs to call the Christians to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one worthy of worship, that this is the religion of Isa, Jesus the son of Mary. But they changed after him. And therefore, there's no way whatsoever they can prove that whatever they're upon today is the religion of Isa alayhi salam. There's no way for them to prove this. And that's why the Prophet ﷺ, through the revelation from Allah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called them and made the matter, once it became very clear to them, then the challenge came. قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ تَعَالَوْا إِلَى كَلِمَةٍ سَوَاءٍ بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمْ أَلَّا نَعْبُدَ إِلَّا اللَّهَ وَلَا يَتَّخِذَ بَعْضُنَا بَعْضًا أَرْبَابًا مِنْ دُونِ اللَّهِ. The verse, that means let's come to a just word between us and you. And that is for us and you not to worship anyone but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to associate partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we don't take one another as arbab, as lords besides Allah. Nobody is going to say to us what is right and what is wrong and so on, our monks, our scholars, our priests, none of that, but from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If they agree to this, then this is the truth that we need to be united upon. If they turn away, then fashhadu, that make witness that we are Muslims. That means we are the true followers of Isa alayhi salam and Musa alayhi salam and all of the prophets of Allah, and they deviated away from the true message of Isa. And if a person believes in Isa alayhi salam, Jesus the son of Mary, in the right way, and before that Musa alayhi salam and so on, then the normal sequence there, that people have to then believe in the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What made them believers in the prophets before, if they claim that they are believers, what stopped them from believing in the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when it's the same core message is the same, and the one that sent them is the same? So whoever denies them, as if they denied themselves their own belief in their own messenger.
And I think there's a very important point regarding this, Shaykh Ibrahim, which is like one of the Christians, he was like debating or something like this with the Prophet, and the Prophet told him like this verse, I think, that everyone is taking like other gods or associating other gods. So they said no, they didn't like worship the monks or the rabbis or something like this. So the Prophet told them, because you are like following what they say, like this is haram, this is halal, this is forbidden, this is permissible, while it's not. So that means that you are making them partners with Allah, because so many people, they misunderstand that to associate partners, that means like I say this is a God beside God, he creates or he gives like blessings or so on and so forth. But there are also other forms of associating partners with Allah. So we'd like to like point on this, because this point is so important, because this is deviation also from the message of Islam.
This was Adi ibn Hatim radiallahu anhu. He was a Christian. And when he became a Muslim and the verses were revealed, then he went to the Prophet ﷺ to ask about the meaning, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talked about the people of the book, the Jews and the Christians, in the verses, and it was mentioned that اتخذوا أحبارهم ورهبانهم أربابا من دون الله, that they took their rabbis and priests as arbab. Arbab is the plural of Rabb, as lords besides Allah. So Ali ibn Hatim, he was asking the Prophet ﷺ, he said, O Prophet of Allah, we did not take them when he was a Christian as lords beside Allah. He understood from this as lords to believe that they are the creators with Allah or so. The Prophet ﷺ, he answered by a question. He's saying, didn't they used to make halal for you permissible, and what's haram, haram for you, what's forbidden, forbidden for you? He said, yes, that's the reality of it. And that's why they get together and they decide, not just in what's permissible and what's not permissible, they also get together to decide what to believe in. So this is how you took them as lords.
Like what's the meaning of Trinity and so on.
Right, this is all decided over history. These are facts, that the religion was formed over history, over generations. It wasn't all from the Prophet of Allah, because the religion, it has to come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the messenger of Allah, then that's the end of it. Then the job of the generations to come and the scholars and so on is to understand, is to reflect, is to act according to the pure message. And this was not the case. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala called them to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. And we see in the religion of Islam, everything is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Revelation, the Quran, and the way of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. That's one of the very important things that people, Jews and Christians and so on, they need to reflect upon this. Religion cannot be man-made. You cannot make your own religion. It's not about what makes sense here or there and so on. This changes all the time. Religion, if it's true religion from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has to be purely, all of it, from the creator of the heavens and the earth. Otherwise, people are making themselves lords besides Allah. I mean, we know that it went even far, that people would sell pieces of the land in paradise for the people, for their salvation. This is how human beings can take themselves to the level of being lords besides Allah. So even the same thing for a Muslim, if a person claims to be upon knowledge of the religion, and he makes what's halal, halal for the people, haram, what's haram for the people, from his own self, and people obey him, they are basically taking him as a lord besides Allah. It's only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's why the beauty of the religion of Islam, everything is saved. What's halal, what's permissible, what's not permissible, how to worship Allah, how to live our life, it's all revelation, saved, protected. No man-made addition to it whatsoever. It's only to explain and to make it clearer to the people, but the matter is already preserved.
So a very important point, Sheikh Ibrahim. We're going to talk about this after the break, about the point of the difference between the truth and also whatever deviates from the truth, about the belief in the attributes also of God, because the restoration of Islam, the last message of what happened, like the change of the message. So we would like to touch upon this, but after the break, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. We're going to meet, inshallah. Stay tuned. Welcome back, dear brothers and sisters, to Signs of Prophethood. And we want to continue with Sheikh Ibrahim Zidan about the point of the creed. And like the difference, of course, there's no difference, as you said, Sheikh Ibrahim, between the one message of Islam during the Jews, the Christians, and even before this, and the time of Prophet Noah, Prophet Abraham, all of them. So we would like also to, like, because you talked about the lordship of Allah, is it different now from other like sects of Christians and Jews and Muslims? We have difference in the belief in the attributes of Allah. Is there something new in the message of Islam?
One of the beautiful things is that when it comes to the subject of who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is, with His names and attributes, there's no like of what has been in the final revelation from Allah in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. The previous revelations from Allah, of course it talks about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His attributes and names and so on, but there's nothing more comprehensive than we have in the deen of Islam, because this is the most comprehensive and it's the final revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why in the previous ways of religions and so on, people get distorted away from this truth, and they would talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a very degrading way. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran. And this is when people, human beings, they start dealing with the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the creator of the heavens and the earth, but as if He's another human being with the deficiencies and weaknesses and so on. One of the major differences between Islam as a pure religion and the message of the Prophet ﷺ, and what the nations before the Jews and the Christians distorted from the pure message of Musa and Isa alayhi salam, is the subject of the names and attributes of Allah. Because they always claim deficiencies to Allah. If someone claimed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a son, that's a weakness and a deficiency. If someone claimed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't know or lack of knowledge, or things that are written,
or repents, or fights with other human beings,
or doesn't know, for example, what's in Jannah or what's in this tree or so, and the Old Testament and the New Testament for the people, they have many of these types of things, claiming deficiencies to Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that in the Quran, وَقَالَتِ الْيَهُودُ يَدُ اللَّهِ مَغْلُولَةٌ, when they said that the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is tied. So this is something that is very well known, and that has its own effect in the lives of the people. And that's why they would legislate for themselves, and they would claim what is right and what is wrong away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Because they see the greatness of God inside their hearts.
And the image that the people have in their hearts to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is some angry God that is sending strikes on the people and being angry and this and that. It's because of the subject of the names and attributes. Compare this to what's in the religion of Islam that talks about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the creator of the heavens and earth. He's the one that has the perfect names and attributes. That all of the attributes mentioned about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nobody can even comprehend the essence of it. So when we talk about He's the most merciful, it's not according to what we even think of what mercy is. Because we are part of that mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the mercy that we have in our hearts. His mercy is beyond what all of the human beings might think of mercy. The same thing with He's the most just. His justice is beyond what human beings can even perceive of justice. So nobody is to question the justice of Allah. Nobody is to question His mercy and His knowledge and so on, because nothing is the like of Him. Because we are creation of Allah, and the Creator is the Creator. He's not the creation. But this subject is really not, is confused to many people, except in the deen of Islam. That's why one of the basic, very straightforward, and something should be we all relate to, that we have to understand, the Creator is the Creator and the creation are the creation. The creation cannot be the Creator and the Creator cannot be the creation. They are totally separate, they're totally different, and nothing is the like of the Creator with His perfect names and attributes. And creation are in need and they are deficient and they have all kinds of weaknesses and so on. So don't have your weaknesses to be put in the image of who's the Creator is. The Creator subhanahu wa ta'ala has no faults whatsoever.
SubhanAllah. As a side note, Sheikh Ibrahim, I always had this question. How is it possible for a person to have this idea to change the Word of God and to attribute even to God these things? Like this question comes to me, how? What are the steps that makes a person reaches to this level?
Well, this has two ways to it. One way is what the hypocrites did even at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and what hypocrites would do at all times. Someone that is not in that faith, a disbeliever, and he wants to cause corruption, so he would pretend to be among the believers and change within. And this is something that human beings, they do all the time. Right? So this is
spies now between countries.
The other way is someone that was righteous, someone that was sincere, then he changes over time. This is also happens. And how is that? Is when a person allow for the desires of this world to overcome. You know, sometimes it's the love of having followers or the status or arrogance. And this is one of the biggest trials for people of religion when it comes to the followers. They know the truth, but they have millions of followers, for example. How can we turn back and say that all of what I've been preaching for all of my years is all wrong, and the truth is this? It needs strength and truthfulness, and someone that doesn't care really much about his status and about his wealth and so on. Someone purely, sincerely doing things for the sake of Allah. And human beings, they have temptations and desires, and the shaitan whispers and so on. And that's what many of them, those who knew the truth and they turned away from it, because of this seed of arrogance, or because of the stubbornness, or because of the status that they have in this life. So how can a person reach this level? Sins, the desires of this world take the person one step after the other, and we have this even among Muslims. A person can start up being someone good and righteous and so on, then glamour, fame, being in status, being close to those who are in leadership and so on, and they start influencing them and pressuring them and even threatening them that they might lose their life or to be imprisoned or whatever. So people would basically sell the truth for the weaknesses and the desires of this world, for some money, maybe for some position.
How can a person protect himself against these things?
Wallahi, the protection to this is for the person to be firm upon the deen. That's why the early generations of Islam, they looking into the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, being steadfast on the deen of Allah, and to understand that the goal is not this life. So to yearn for some position, or to be famous, or to be leaders, and so on, this is something that is against being a true Muslim. You have to be a leader if you are a leader, because people have to have leaders, but it's not something that you seek. And that's why one of the basic things for those who are righteous, they don't seek superiority on the face of earth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that in the Quran. تِلْكَ الدَّارُ الْآخِرَةُ الَّتِي نَجْعَلُهَا الَّذِينَ لَا يُرِيدُونَ عُلُوًّا فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فَسَادًا. They don't seek in their hearts, they don't seek superiority on the face of earth, and they don't seek corruption. So when the heart is pure like this, even if it happens that their fame or wealth or whatever, they put it in the right perspective. Because the heart is attached to the hereafter. And following the way of the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ, how was his life and materialistic life and so on, and how he was the example to all mankind.
SubhanAllah. So these points about God, Sheikh Ibrahim, we want to also talk about the difference in the view of prophets, because also the previous religions, after distortion, they view prophets in a different way from the final message of Islam that corrected this image.
Right. Human beings with the work of shaitan, shaitan constantly working on them to fall into the worst crime ever, which is shirk, or associating partners with Allah. For people to die in the state of disbelief, for them to be in the hellfire forever. So the way for shirk is for the hearts to be attached to other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one of the ways of deviation that the shaitan works on the people with this is to have the hearts attached to the prophets more than what the status of the prophets are. So people usually will become to two extremes. One extreme is they love the messenger of Allah so much that they would put him in a level that is divine. And they start claiming or attributing some divine attributes to him and holiness and so on. And then one generation after the other till they start worshipping him besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, calling him, making dua and supplication to him, and giving vows to him and so on. And this is what happened to the nations before, like in the case, for example, of Jesus, the son of Mary. And some people even, they fall into this ghulu or extremism among the Muslims. The other extreme, those who disbelieve and those who have dryness and harshness and so on, which is the other extreme. So this is one of the works of deviation that the shaitan works on the people, with the prophets, with the righteous people. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we look into the Quran, the final revelation from Allah, and the way of the Prophet ﷺ, this is a subject that has been protected so much for those who go back to the revelation from Allah. They would see that the entire Quran is about the Tawheed, is about the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in worship, because that's the most important thing. And the way the Prophet ﷺ and his actions, and how he was the softest and the most merciful towards human beings and so on. But when it comes to the subject of associating partners with Allah, even overpraising him, this is the thing that would make the Prophet ﷺ angry. Even if it's something very small, as we know the hadith when the man came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he said to him something that people might say all the time, MashaAllah wa shit. I would do something if Allah wills and if you will. The Prophet ﷺ, he got angry, as the hadith says. He said, أَجَعَلْتَنِي لِلَّهِ نِدًّا. You made me a partner with Allah. Even if this man is not making the Prophet ﷺ a partner with Allah, it doesn't mean that. But just for the statement to be mentioned with a waw, with an and, that puts Allah and the Prophet ﷺ in the same context like this, that made the Prophet ﷺ angry. For what reason? To protect this tawheed. So that nobody later on in generations to come and fall into more deviation and so on.
So what about, sorry to interrupt, Ibrahim, the point also we find like where Allah wa Rasuluhu a'lam or something like this. So how can we understand this? Like there is a where here and,
right,
like Allah and His Prophet knows best. So how can we understand that?
Right, the where is not always something that is condemned when it comes to Allah and His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but it's condemned if it's to deal with the attributes of Allah, that there's nothing is the like of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, for example, Allah wa Rasuluhu a'lam, this was mentioned in the context of the things that the Prophet ﷺ knows. Some things that the Prophet ﷺ doesn't know. Like, for example, now, can we, at the time that we live in, something happened in someone's household, for example, and somebody's asking him, why did you do that to your wife? Can he say, Allah wa Rasuluhu a'lam? No. He should say, Allahu a'lam. But at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, something that we already know that the Prophet ﷺ knows, or the people they knew, then they would say it like this.
Because it's related maybe to revelation. And
right. And the Prophet ﷺ was entrusted with the revelation from Allah. And he's the best man ever walked on the face of earth. And his level is the best level that any human being can reach. But it's not the level of being divine or being to worship besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whoever does this thinking that it's done out of the love to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they are basically doing the total opposite. And the same thing for those who overpraise Isa alayhi salam. Human beings, they do not need this. You just praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone, and put things in the right perspective. Isa alayhi salam never called the people to worship him besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
That's very beautiful, Sheikh Ibrahim. Time flies very fast with you, Sheikh Ibrahim. Very happy. And inshallah, we're going to continue with our topics. Thank you so much. And we thank you, dear brothers and sisters, for following us. Stay tuned for the next episode. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.